Hi, my name's Kevin Hicks. Welcome to the History Squad. You know, I really do love history. You've probably gathered that from some of my films, kings, queens, castles and battles. I do love it. But you know, every now and again when I'm doing my research, you come across the most bizarre tale. You take the crossword puzzle in the Daily Telegraph during the Second World War, almost ruined D-Day. And then you have the hangman, a famous hangman in London, who never really got the hang of it. And then the thief, who escaped from prison so many times, they may as well have just given him the key. So what we've done is we've put these stories together. We've made a compilation. So welcome to Stranger Than Fiction, bizarre but true tales from history. Now, my first story is about Jack Sheppard. He was executed at the age of 22 years of age, 1724. Now, he started his life, he was born in Spitalfields, he started his working life as an apprentice carpenter. But it wasn't exciting enough. And he fell in with the crowd and became a burglar and a picklock. He could open locks, that kind of thing. Now, one of the ladies he fell in with was Edgeworth Bess. And he found out that she'd been arrested and was held in Spitalfield's roundhouse, a lockup. So he strode in, knocks the guard unconscious, grabs the keys, unlocks, and they make their escape. So it's the beginning of a bit of a notorious reputation, but not as a burglar, as an escapologist. People liked this daring do. Now, he was arrested shortly after this, and he himself was incarcerated in Spitalfield's roundhouse. He was locked up, but they hadn't searched him. Not properly at any rate, because he had a razor, a cutthroat razor secreted about his person. And what does the beggar do? He cuts the lath and plaster ceiling, brings it down and escapes through, out onto the roof and has it on his toes. He will become, our Jack, quite famous as this prisoner who could escape not just from a lockup, but also from manacles of all different kinds. So Jack Sheppard finds himself wrongly arrested for the theft of a watch. Oh, the horror of being wrongfully arrested. He's thrown into new prison, Clerkenwell, where he's locked up, handcuffed, and his feet are manacled to the ground. Fettered to the ground, they call it. And would you believe, shortly afterwards, Bess, his old friend, he's actually thrown into the same cell. She too is handcuffed. Then they have a visitor, Joseph Blake, Joe Blake, nicknamed Blueskin. He's one of their circle of friends, shall we say, and he surreptitiously slips a file through the bars. Now, Jack Sheppard uses this, when nobody's looking, to free himself from his manacles and from the fetters around his feet. He does the same for Bess, his friend. They then make a rope out of sheets and blankets and they file two of the bars of the prison windows. Now Bess takes off her outer clothes because she's got to slip through the window, through the narrow gap. They lower themselves 30 feet down the outside of the prison and then across the courtyard, and then they scale the 20-foot external prison wall and down the other side and have it on their toes. These two, what a double act. Amazingly, Jack Sheppard with his partner, Blueskin, they perform a few, or commit, shall we say, a few robberies, and the proceeds from it, they hand these over to a receiver named Field. Now, this was in defiance of the local crime lord. His name was Wild. Now, Wild was both thief-taker, in other words, he would report thieves to the Crown, receive the reward money, nasty piece of work, but he persuaded Field, the receiver, to turn King's evidence against Jack Sheppard and Blueskin. And they were arrested, those two. They were put on trial at the Old Bailey, found guilty of thievery and robbery and sentenced to death and placed in the notorious jail, Newgate Prison, where they were visited by a certain Bess and her friend Poll Maggot. I think that's Polly. And they were swinging things around, shall we say, and they distracted the guards and managed to slip Jack Shepherd a file. And then they left. A couple of days later, so did Jack Shepherd. He went through the roof and over the wall. He had it on his toes again. The public loved it. Oh, this guy, nobody can keep him. He was actually becoming an embarrassment to the authorities, but a hero to the common populace. I must admit, as I've been reading this story, it does make me smile. You see, Jack Shepherd was soon arrested again. He was placed into Newgate prison and they chained him to the floor. He was not allowed any visitors whatsoever, and that's it. He's not going to escape. However, he'd found a bent nail, and he used the nail to undo the lock on the chains, and he escaped up the chimney and over the roof, covered in soot. The people of London were just, wow, what is this guy? But unfortunately, he was a bit of a fool sometimes. He swaggered around, enjoying the limelight, getting drunk with old Bess when he was spotted and arrested. This time, when he was incarcerated, they had special manacles and chains that were made. Jack knew that his time was up. So old Jack Shepherd there is locked up in Newgate prison. He knows he's going to hang. Now he has a stream of visitors who pass by his cell. They can pay to come and watch, and, banter and good wishes are passed backwards and forth. He could have done with a file, but he was being watched very closely. In fact, Jack got his hands on a penknife, but a vigilant guard saw it and it was confiscated. Jack is done. He's going to hang. But he had a backup plan. He had hired the services of a surgeon. His friends will take down his body immediately after he's been hanged, and Jack will be resuscitated. Well, that was the plan. But it didn't go quite according to plan. On the 16th of November, 1724, at the age of 22, Jack will be hanged. Now, the journey from Newgate all the way to Tyburn on the back of the cart, the crowds were waiting. Jack Shepherd is their hero. He's a celebrity. They're cheering him. There is jokes, there is banter. In fact, just before he reaches the Oxford Road, apparently he burst out laughing loud because somebody cracked such a joke. He waits at the Oxford Inn, the City Oxford Tavern, and has a bowl of mulled sack. I think that's a kind of wine. He is enjoying the adoration, I suppose you would call it. And when he gets to the hanging tree, the triple tree, there is an enormous crowd waiting for him, cheering Jack. He is their hero. The noose is placed. The drop is done. Now the plan. A soldier runs forward, claims the body of Jack Shepherd. What the people don't realise is he is supposed to take Jack to the surgeon to be revived. But the crowd think that the body is being taken for the surgeons to dissect. They attack the soldier. The soldier then, with his friends, fights back. In amongst all of this, you have the body of Jack Shepherd, which is desperately in need of revival. Instead, what happens? It gets battered around. It ends up in the Barley Mound Tavern, which is near Covent Garden. But now there is a riot. The people have gone berserk, fighting each other. Brickbats are used to smash up property. Looting, attacks go all around. The people now have actually forgotten what was the cause of the riot. It's out of control. Some people think that Jack's body is already gone. It's away to the surgeons. But in fact, it wasn't. It was left there and then later buried at St. Martin in the Fields churchyard. Jack Shepherd, one of those stories, one of the many men who were hanged at Tyburn. Triple Tree. Jack Shepherd. Our next story is about Mary, Queen of Scots, a cousin to Elizabeth I and a threat to the English throne. After 19 years in captivity, her fate was sealed with charges of treason and a signed death warrant. Her execution in 1587 was meant to be a solemn, controlled affair. But what happened was anything but. It became one of the most bizarre and unsettling royal executions in British history. Let's take a look at the final moments of Mary, Queen of Scots. As executions go, they should be quite straightforward, but this one, wow, really sticks out. Now, she was a controversial figure. Was she complicit in the murder of her husband, Lord Darnley? Whoa, what a story. But apparently this lady was quite a beauty. And I see in lots of the films about Mary, Queen of Scots, she has a broad Scots accent, but I doubt it because she was raised in France. And so I understand would have had a French accent. Anyway, she's supposed to have had this red gold hair and be quite a lady who could twist men round her little finger, as if that could ever happen. Yeah. Well, she's been found guilty, treason, and reluctantly Queen Elizabeth I has signed a death warrant and is going to have her own cousin executed. So there, at Fotheringhay Castle on February the 8th, 1587, Mary Queen of Scots would be executed. The scaffold or the stage is bedecked in black cloth. There is the executioner with his axe and the block is all set. She makes the most dramatic entrance. She's dressed in black. She has her rosary, her ladies in waiting. And then they undo the black outer garment and it drops to the ground. She's dressed in crimson. Wow, what an entrance. Here she is as this dour religious woman, and then the blood of Christ in the colour of her dress. What a statement. And people, spellbound watching this. She then kneels, says her prayers, and when she is ready, she thrusts out her arms. The axe woof, comes down, but misses the neck. She was heard to gasp. Then another slice with the axe, thump, but it fails. It fails to sever the head. In fact, it took 3 blows of the axe before the head was removed from the body. The executioner then holds up the head. God save Queen Elizabeth. But he didn't know that Mary was wearing a wig. It was a secret. Can you imagine that? You're standing there. There's the head dripping with blood. God save, poof, head falls, rolls down the steps. Let's make this a drama. You're there with the red wig. You look down. The Queen's head has white hair. It was a secret. She turned white some years before, prematurely. So sad. Oh my gosh. Now, this panicking headsman puts the head onto the crimson cushion, the velvet cushion there, so people can come and see. He replaces the wig. Did he get it on right? I have no idea. But when he moves the body, little did he know, under her dress was her pet dog. It starts to howl. This whole scene, it's a farce. But at the end of the day, it was butchery. What a terrible end. And there's a twist in the tale. Her son becomes King of England. James I of England, 6th of Scotland. He has his mother's body removed from where it was buried and buried in Westminster Abbey, just adjacent Elizabeth I. There they are, cousins, resting in peace. Now this story is about a character I've been fascinated with for years, Jack Ketch, who in my opinion was one of the most bloodthirsty public servants that England has ever seen. So, Jack Ketch, appointed as public executioner 1663. He was a public servant, paid to do the job. We know very little about his early life. We know he was married. We also know his wife, I think, regarded him as a bit of a bungling idiot, but that's between those two. He was famous as the hangman for the Tyburn Triple Tree, and that could hang dozens of people at once. But he appeared to play to the crowd. The more I read about him, the more I think to myself, this guy was a showman, a sadist, or was he just a simpleton playing to the crowd? However, his victims could be made to suffer. You didn't have a long drop on the Tyburn tree and then snap. This is what Ketch used to do. You will have already come the distance from Newgate Prison in London to the outskirts to the Triple Tree, Tyburn. The rope will be tied up to the beam, put round your neck, tightened. This is the knot they used, but a much thicker rope. This is just for you to see. You would then be stood on the edge of a cart, a horse and cart, nothing else, no long drop. And the cart would simply be pulled away and you will swing off it and you will choke to death. He could make you dance, dangle. And people had this love-hate relationship with Jack Ketch. Was he this evil man? Was he sadistic? Or was he just giving everybody, a performance for their money? It's awful to think, isn't it? Because he was playing with life and death. Well, this got into the psyche of the Londoners, so much so that the Punch and Judy shows that used to be around, they changed the villain. Punchinello used to beat the devil, but they changed it. He beat Jack Ketch. He used to beat him with a slap and a stick, where they get the saying slapstick for slapstick comedy. But there's actually an image showing Punchinello, Punch and Judy, hanging Jack Ketch and showing him how to hang someone correctly. Now, Jack Ketch, already notorious as a hangman, on the 21st of July, 1683, he becomes an axeman. This is the execution of Lord Russell. It was part of a plot to assassinate both Charles II and James II. This is quite a period of history, becomes the Monmouth Rebellion. Well, Lord Russell, he is found guilty of treason. There's this whole plot around him. Jack Ketch is simply told, you're going to have to cut off his head. He'd never wielded an axe before in his life. And poor Lord Russell can smell beer, ale on the breath of Ketch. He's nervous. So he gives him 10 guineas and asks him to do a good job. He then kneels down. And what happens now? He's actually awful. The first blow misses the head and the neck completely, but splits the shoulder. Can you imagine the agony of having an axe woof straight through your shoulder? He then pulls it out. Now, I know from experience using an axe, not on somebody's head, but once it's in the ground, it's in the wood or it's in a piece of meat, you've got to really pull it back. He then brings the axe down again, misses the head, misses the neck, but almost severs Lord Russell's ear. He must have been in agony. There must have been blood all over the place. Lord Russell turns his head to Ketch and calls him, "You dog." Ketch then brings the axe down again and again. So many times, nobody can tell you exactly how many times he brought the axe down upon their head. He fails to sever it with the axe. He tries to give up, but the sheriff tells him, "Get on with the job." He then uses one of these, a short saw, to finish off the job. He holds up the head. The public are absolutely going berserk. This was terrible. But hey, he did the job. And what he becomes now is the executioner, the hangman, the axeman for the bloody assizes, Judge Jeffreys, over the Monmouth Rebellion. So, Jack Ketch's fame is assured. The execution of poor Lord Russell, people can remember it. So, 2 years later, July 1685, the execution of the Duke of Monmouth for his part in the Monmouth Rebellion on Tower Hill there, the crowd are gathering. They want to see another show, another famous gentry is going to be executed. But this is so important that there is a circle of guards around the execution block. The crowd presses in and Jack Ketch is there. Now, the Duke of Monmouth turns to Jack Ketch and says, "Here are 6 guineas. Don't hack me like you did my friend Lord Russell. My servant has more gold for you if you do a good job." So the Duke of Monmouth bows his head to the block, kneels down, places his head over the block. The first blow didn't hit the neck squarely. Neither did the second. This man, the Duke of Monmouth, must have been in agony, blood spurting everywhere. Now, scuffles break out in the crowd. There is going to be trouble. The guards have to turn away from the execution to put down people, push them back. They say it took 5 blows to actually sever the head. Now Jack Ketch has struck again. He will now have to be escorted from the scene by armed guards. So angry were the crowd. So this business with Jack Ketch is interesting, isn't it? You know, the execution of the Duke of Monmouth, if he'd have done it right, if he'd have severed the head 1, maybe 2 blows, he'd have had an extra bag of gold. So it begs the question, doesn't it? Was he bribed, ordered by the king to make these executions as violent and painful as possible? Or did he just not care about the money? Did he hate the aristocracy? Or was he a bit of a bumbling fool like his wife thought? Now, as if this wasn't horrible enough, there's written evidence about what Ketch did after the executions. Thomas Elwood, a Quaker and friend of the poet John Milton, had been arrested and imprisoned in Newgate Prison on religious grounds, and it was whilst he was there he witnessed Ketch's treatment of the severed heads after execution. This is what he had to say. When they were brought up to be boiled, the hangman fetched them in a dusty, dirty basket out of some place, and then settling them down amongst the felons, he then made sport with them. So, I've got one here. Of course I have. But then amongst the felons, the other prisoners, they make fun. They slap them, hold them by the hair, give them names before he boils them. So Jack Ketch, he would play with the heads. He would have sport with them. So was he a sadist? 23 years' reign as the public executioner. It finished in 1686. But early on in the year, he got into trouble. And he was put into Bridewell prison for insulting the sheriff. Now, his replacement, Pasha Rose, who was a butcher by trade, wasn't in office for very long because he himself was hanged for burglary. So they had to fetch Jack Ketch out of prison, but he didn't last long. He died in November 1686. His legacy, though, for the next 200 years was that the name Jack Ketch became a nickname for many of London's public executioners. So our next true bizarre story from history goes back to the Second World War, June 1944, just before D-Day, when top secret code names began appearing as clues in a daily crossword puzzle in England. Was somebody trying to give the secrets to the enemy, or was it simply a coincidence?
So you imagine in the south of England, just a month or so before the D-Day landings, they must have been so incredibly busy. Operation Fortitude in the background, the phantom armies, the real armies, everybody is building up momentum, ships coming into Southampton. Everything is about to take off when something could have stopped the whole lot. An incredible breach of security. The code words are out. On the 2nd of May, 1944, the Daily Telegraph, with their crossword, one of the clues, Utah. Then on the 22nd of May, it's Omaha. 27th of May, Overlord. And then the 30th of May, Mulberry. So you imagine the tensions in the intelligence service of the British and the Americans, how they are building. And it's just about a week before D-Day itself, 1st of June, when the Telegraph crossword gives the great code word Neptune. So now we have 5 out of 10 of the main code words for D-Day have been placed in the crossword. Is it a German spy, a double agent? Who is it? So MI5 leap into action and they catch their spy. Leonard Dorr, the headmaster from Strand School, and the story of what he was doing is absolutely brilliant. So Leonard Dorr has been arrested. He is suspected of being an enemy agent. His senior colleague, Melville Jones, he's also arrested, and these men are put through the mill. And the story that comes out is quite interesting, because the entire school had been evacuated out of the London area to Effingham in Surrey.
Now, in addition to being a teacher, as a sideline, Leonard used to write the crossword for the Daily Telegraph newspaper. And what Leonard used to do
was leave a crossword grid, an empty one, for the pupils to actually write in words, and then Leonard would actually put the clue to the words. It would appear this is coincidence. Or was it? Because this whole thing, 5 out of 10 of the main code words, it's a little bit suspicious. But the truth, the absolute truth of this, wouldn't come out until the 40th anniversary of the D-Day landings. It was Ronald French, who was 14 at the time of the landings and was part of the school, and he filled in the details. The boys got their ideas for the clues from American soldiers who were stationed in a base next to the school. The boys were hunting for unusual words. So, Utah, Omaha, words that were being bandied around by the American soldiers. Interesting, isn't it, that they overheard it? Careless talk cost lives. At the end of the day, this whole business of the crossword was pure coincidence.
Our final story takes us to the railroad tracks of 19th century America and involves a man who survived an accident so bizarre it still figures in medical textbooks to this very day. Phineas Gage, born in 1823, New Hampshire, United States of America. He was described as being very healthy, muscular, strong, and come 1848 is employed on the Hudson River Railway in New York. He was employed to blast open the rock. But by September, he's actually the blasting foreman. So he really is good when it comes to explosives. He in fact had a tamping iron. This is Kev's wooden replica. It's pointed at one end, just over 3 foot long, and about 1.25 inches in its width, in its diameter there. So Phineas Gage, he's not just somebody who is messing about with explosives. He's a bit of an expert. Now, what they did, you can often see it on some of the films. They will hammer in these spikes to make a hole inside the rock. And then your explosive man will put down the gunpowder, he will put the fuse, and he will put then the sand, and using the blunt end, he will tamp it down. It was on September the 13th, 1848, round about 4:30 in the afternoon, when Phineas Gage was preparing an explosive charge in the railway cutting. He heard voices behind him just as he was about to tamp down a gunpowder charge. As he turned, it's thought that he failed to put in the sand on top of the charge, because as he tamped down with the iron spike, it must have sparked and the explosive charge went off. It fired the iron spike. His head was turned, it hit him somewhere around here, went through the cheekbone, through his left eye, through his brain, and out the top of his head. And would you believe it? That iron tamping spike landed 80 feet, covered in blood, bone and brain, further down the railway cutting. Can you imagine the scene in that railway cutting? Boom! Massive explosion, rocks shooting out everywhere. Phineas Gage is thrown on his back. The iron spike shoots down the cutting. When the men recovered the iron spike, they said it was greasy with all of the blood and bits of brain upon it. This is a scene of horror. Poor old Phineas, he starts to shake and convulse his arms and legs. And then to everybody's astonishment, he speaks. He then gets up and walks towards the roadway. His men can't get their head around what's happened here. There must have been a lot of blood coming out of the hole in the side of his face. But he climbs onto the ox cart with very little help, and they they drive the 3/4 of a mile back to town. Phineas sits upright and he's chatting to everybody. When he arrives in the centre of town at his lodgings, they help him down. Very little assistance is needed. Now remember, this guy has got a hole straight through his head and there's part of his brain is missing. He sits on a chair on the veranda to his lodgings and he chats to the men around him. He talks to them about how he's hardly ever missed a day's work in his life and he's eager to get back to work on the railway. I don't think he had any idea how serious his injury was. They're now waiting for the doctor to appear. Now, I've got a piece of the doctor's original statement here, and it blows your mind. I did not believe Mr. Gage's statement at the time, but thought he'd been deceived. Mr. Gage persisted in saying that the spike had gone clean through his head. This is incredible, isn't it? Well, as you can see, I've made a model, and I think it's time I showed you with my model pretty much what happened to Phineas Gage. So I'm going to leave the lower jaw behind, and I'm going to show you how the spike has gone through. Fortunately, it went through with the spike, the pointy end first. So it's driven up through the cheek, it's gone through the eye, through the brain, it's come out through the top, it's going all the way through. So this has gone through and landed 80 feet away. That piece is still there. So I'm going to just take the lid off my model. Just to let you know, nobody was hurt during the filming of this process. But if we take out my model brain here, have a look at that. Dr. John Harlow, Phineas's own physician, turns up at the scene at about 6 p.m. Dr. Williams was still on the scene and assisted Dr. Harlow in shaving the scalp around the wound of poor old Phineas. And they removed coagulated blood and bone fragments. They've removed all of that horrible gore out of that. Then they replace 2 large pieces of bone and they fix them in place with adhesive straps, but they leave it propped ever so slightly open, and then they bandage it round loosely and they need to secure it. So what do? They put on a nightcap and they secure everything around so it will stay in place. Then the doctor's orders are that as he lies down, his head is to be elevated. The recovery process for Phineas Gage was going to be quite long, but he stunned the medical community. Within 3.5 weeks of the injury, he could raise himself up on his pillow, and in no time at all, he could walk up and down the stairs. By November, that's 2 months after the injury, he was fit enough to return home. So Phineas Gage has pretty much recovered. Phineas Gage was now a medical phenomenon. In fact, he was able to become a living museum exhibit for Barnum's American Museum in New York City. And he often appeared at other locations too in New England. He would be there with his beloved railway spike. And he would do these appearances just so he could earn an honest penny. But on the 21st of May 1860, poor old Phineas Gage finally succumbs to his injury. He dies from an epileptic fit. Now, there is one rumour that Phineas was buried with his iron spike, and the skull together with the iron spike are now still on display at the Warren Anatomical Museum, part of the Harvard Medical School. It's quite something when you think about it, because Phineas Gage's survival defied the odds, but his life after the accident changed him forever. His story reshaped neuroscience, making him the most famous patient in brain science history. Well, I hope you enjoyed that compilation of ours, those strange but bizarre tales from history. If you did, like, share and subscribe. And if you'd like to support the channel further, why not have a look at joining in with our Patreon community? The link, it's in the description. Now, before I go, a quick shout out to some of our Patreon members. Jeannie Oakwood, Richard Marriott Smith and Ryan Hawkins. Hey guys, without your support, we wouldn't be able to make these films. So thanks a million. Bye for now.